Australia's housing market has officially turned into some sort of dystopian nightmare, as new data reveals that it's next to impossible for young people to save up for a home deposit. What's so crazy is that our housing market has gone from being like Little House on the Prairie, where owning your own home was available to anyone with a job, to the current state of the market, which is more like the Hunger Games, where only wealthy families and wealthy foreigners can afford the homes, and everyone else is left to fight over the scraps. And shockingly, this total destruction of the housing market has occurred in just 25 short years. However, there's a few small glimmers of hope starting to arise. I'm Biko Konstantinos, and that's what we're going to talk about today. What do you do if a bird shits on your windscreen? Don't go out with her ever again. But you can go out with me by hitting that like button and subscribing if you haven't already. Together we can navigate this volatile economic period while I'll provide you with my independent analysis and commentary. I mean, what more could you want? Except maybe a bloody home. Let's check out this dystopian nightmare and consider if there's any hope on the horizon.
Tonight we have concerning new data. Analysis shows this year's high school leavers won't be able to afford a house until they're almost 40 years old.
It's not concerning, it's a complete and utter betrayal.
A beautiful part of the world to be able to call home.
It's a beautiful part of the world if you own property, baby.
The Australian dream,
Often racing here at 1.5 the bid.
bounding further and further out of reach.
Selling at 2,120,000 we are.
If you told someone back in the 1980s that small dog boxes are now selling for those sorts of prices just 30 years later, they would think you've come from another planet, because even with inflation, there's no way they could ever have imagined that house prices would have been hyperinflated to these ridiculous, insane levels.
So congratulations to my boy.
Quickly becoming a nightmare for those not yet in the race.
Now, I'm not going to have a go at boomers because I'm pretty old myself. Bloody boomers. You won the housing lottery by being able to buy when it was ultra cheap, easily paying off those mortgages, so now you have next to no debt, and you've been able to cash in from decades of policies that have hyperinflated house prices. Boomers, I'm not having a go at you. It's all the policies that have created this speculative obsession with housing that's really stuffed everything up, in my opinion.
The market's definitely picked up a lot since the new year.
I wonder if that has anything to do with record migration combined with the devaluing of the Australian currency causing hard asset prices to skyrocket.
We've really seen properties increase in value, and it's just about getting into the market and not worrying about getting a good deal.
What absolute rubbish. We've created this frenzied fear of missing out housing market where we see this kind of mentality of buy at any price just to get into the market. We're basically telling people to take on as much debt as they possibly can to become a debt slave for life, and then face the risk of getting totally wiped out if interest rates start surging in the future. I mean, if you're looking to buy a TV, you'll shop around just trying to save $100 or $200, but when it comes to a property, you're encouraged to pay an extra $100,000, $200,000 just to get into the market. This is what happens when you prioritize housing as a way to create wealth rather than being a safe and secure shelter for someone to live in.
Now, teenagers are being urged to start planning ahead. New data shows those graduating high school this year will have to save for around 21 years to afford a deposit on a home in Brisbane.
So basically you're 18 years old and then you've got another 21 years of savings just to have enough for a home deposit.
That means that realistically, home ownership is becoming more and more of a pipe dream.
Not if you already own property. The more properties you own, the easier it is to purchase additional properties, especially when you factor in the ultra generous tax concessions for property owners.
Melbourne teenagers are also facing a 21-year wait, slightly less time in Adelaide at 17 years, while in Sydney it will take 18-year-olds now 46 years to save enough money to break into the market.
There's just no words. If this isn't alarming, then I don't know what is.
Even if young people are able to save up enough money for the deposit, the data shows mortgage repayments would still take up a large chunk of their income.
But you know what? Millions of Australians would gladly pay a large chunk of their income if they could own their own home. And that's because it's way better than renting, where prices can surge by any figure you can imagine, and you're always just one step away from potentially being homeless.
The average mortgage repayment on a typical house in 21 years' time is going to be about 63% of the median wage.
Surely we can get that up to 100% or even more. It's not like people need any extra money to buy food or anything trivial like that.
Many young people forced to turn to the bank of mum and dad for help.
Not everyone gets handed a massive property portfolio from their parents. In fact, this is the sort of parental support that many Australians can look forward to.
But not everyone is fortunate enough. And for those people, I would just say start saving early, learn how to budget, and just try to keep to that budget as closely as you can.
Is this some sort of a joke? We're telling young people to save every dollar they can when the value of those dollars that they're trying to save is being completely destroyed through inflation. I mean, what's the point of trying to save $5,000 or $10,000 when house prices have been going up about $100,000 every year? It's like telling someone to push a boulder up a bloody hill. How about we stop devaluing the dollar through reckless spending, and then young people can maybe get some value from trying to save. But if money's just becoming worthless, we might as well all just mortgage ourselves up to the eyeballs, because the debt will be inflated away and the value of hard assets will continue to be hyperinflated. It's just the Australian way. We'll just keep inflating until it all collapses down. Let's delve into this a bit closer by checking out this article from Macro Business. Sydney's housing market, by all accounts, is a speculative absurdity. New data showing that the median house price has ballooned to 1.6 million. And that's just a mid-price house, nothing fancy whatsoever. As we've discussed before, the 70s, 80s and 90s were a great time to buy houses, and Sydney's no exception. And that's because house prices rose quite slowly and very orderly. During most of that period, they rose probably around 3 to 4% a year, which was similar to wages and inflation. And like all of Australia, things started going nuts after 2000, and Sydney is the epicenter of crazy house prices in Australia. And that's why new analysis from Finder is stating that the typical school leaver would take 46 years to save a home deposit in Sydney. What sort of a cruel joke is this? You save up for 46 years and you buy a home with 20% deposit. If you bought the median priced home as a single income earner, your house repayments would be 127% of your before tax income. So you do what you're told and you save. You retire from work and you can finally afford that dog box. But you can't even afford to live. And that's just based on a 4.66% mortgage rate. And I don't know how they calculated what house prices would be in 46 years. But if they keep rising way faster than wages like they have since the year 2000, you've basically got zero chance of buying the home anyway. Welcome to Australia, where we give everyone a fair go if you own property. And if you don't,
you're screwed.
Yes, the other Australian cities aren't as bad, but having to save for 21 years in cities like Brisbane and Melbourne is still utterly disgraceful. And what makes it even worse is that rents are soaring, cost of living is out of control. So how is a young person supposed to get ahead if they can't tap into the bank of mum and dad? This is the #1 issue in Australia right now, because if you don't have safe and secure shelter, you'll always be in a state of survival mode, which means Australia will miss out on so much innovation and productivity that would have come from Australians who didn't have to constantly stress about their housing. Now, I said that I am seeing a few glimmers of hope, and that's because more people are starting to speak out about the housing crisis, and we're starting to see a little bit of what I would call real talk. Liberal Party member for Menzies, Keith Wolahan, is speaking up about the housing crisis.
After the day-to-day stresses of cost of living, there is no more important matter to the public right now than housing. Something's got to change.
My oath it does, Keith. And why else have I singled out this speech? Well, Keith happens to mention one of Australia's most charismatic and handsome commentators.
On YouTube, there is a person called Biko Konstantinos who speaks about this every few days with passion and concern.
Okay, I may not be charismatic and handsome, but I do commentate. Then we saw Queensland Premier Stephen Miles call on the Albanese government to cut immigration to help Queensland deal with the massive influx of new arrivals. Now this is quite a stunning move from a Labor Premier, but the fact he's speaking out on a real issue affecting real lives to me is encouraging. And finally, Opposition Leader Peter Dutton has promised to significantly reduce immigration levels if he wins the next election. Dutton says he'd cut permanent migration to 140,000 for the first 2 years, followed by 150,000 and then 160,000. Now I'm encouraged that migration levels are being openly discussed because a sharp reduction will bring the most immediate relief to this housing crisis. And when young Australians are having to save for over 20 years just for a home deposit, you know we're in a bloody crisis. But in my opinion, we have to go further. We need a total reform to disincentivize buying properties solely for wealth creation. If we don't fix this now, the dystopian world of the Hunger Games could actually become our reality.
And may the odds be ever in your favor.
I'm Biko Konstantinos.